Hey everybody, Charles here. Welcome to our 50th episode of the Mindfully Masculine podcast. Dan and I would like to say thank you very much for sticking with us and listening to all these thoughts and ideas we've been putting out here, and we appreciate the support and the feedback that we've received, and we would love more of both. If you would like to support us, you can find us on our Patreon at patreon.com/mindfullymasculine. And you can email us at mindfullymasculine@gmail.com. All right, today's episode is titled Woke Words That Scare Men. And Dan and I get into some touchy, controversial subjects and why we can all learn some new things and not react with fear or apprehension. So I hope you enjoy this one. It was a somewhat stressful idea to turn into a podcast. And as you'll hear, Dan and I don't see eye to eye on all these issues, but I believe we can learn from each other, and we can learn from you too. So please share your thoughts with us. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy. Welcome to the Mindfully Masculine podcast with Charles and Dan, where we take a conscious, holistic, and direct approach to relationships, mental health, and self-improvement. For additional content, visit mindfullymasculine.com and follow Mindfully Masculine on Instagram.
Good morning, Charles.
Good morning, Dan. How are you?
I'm great. Excellent.
I am I'm pretty great too. Didn't get quite the amount of sleep last night that I like, but who's able to consistently pull off 14 hours? Not me.
I thought you were going to say there's a full moon and Teen Wolf was in full effect for you.
No, nothing that exciting. It's just
no.
Yeah, some days I get my fill of sleep, and some days I wake up feeling like didn't quite pull it off, but it's all right. I'm got a pretty busy day today. Depending on I don't know. There's a couple ways my weekend could go. You and I are definitely going to spend some time together one day this weekend, and I'm looking forward to planning out our agenda for show topics for the rest of 2022, and that's pretty exciting, I think.
I'm definitely excited. That definitely changes the day-to-day working operations for us, so we're not trying to scramble and I know it doesn't really seem like it to all those listeners out there, but sometimes it's a little bit of a last-minute scramble to get our subjects even picked out. So appreciate you guys hanging out and sticking with us. But we're going to get better, and that's exactly what we're going to do this weekend. We were inspired by Podcast Movement to really get organized and figure out how to really enjoy this journey a little bit more than just waiting for the destination. So
it's definitely
movement here.
It's one of those things where sometimes well-planned fun is more fun than chaotic fun. And, there's a certain amount of planning that I have to put into my work and even my vacations, where it's like, if I want to be able to relax, I have to invest some time in the planning in order to make that relaxation possible. You know what I mean? I can't just buy an airline ticket and show up at a place and then just try to figure it all out in the seat of my pants when I get there. It's like, I have to do a certain amount of planning to lay the groundwork so that the spontaneity and the sort of just rolling with the punches can feel like it's fun. Where if I just do no planning, then it feels like I'm just overwhelmed in, choices and chaos, and, podcasting's no different. I think once we kind of lock down the topics we want to talk about and the books we want to review and the video topics we want to get into, it'll feel a little bit looser, which sounds counterintuitive. It'll feel a little bit looser than just trying to scramble for topics before every episode.
Yeah, I mean, any kind of planning in advance is, it's like an investment in your future, right? And it's a lot of discomfort in a short period of time because, I mean, some people enjoy planning. I'm not one of them, but I definitely enjoy the feeling immediately afterwards. And then having that plan structure and being able to just follow it, just follow the plan. And then you're right. I'm much more relaxed, much more loose. And I definitely enjoy that a lot more. And it spurs on a lot more creativity and a lot of other good stuff. So
yeah, exactly. Creativity is one of those things where, the circumstances have to be right for creativity. I mean, there are some people that can be creative in any situation. I'm just not one of those people. I have to, I mean, even just, when we did the Be Your Best series, I think I talked about how even just having a clean living space lets me be more creative because I'm not distracted and worried about clutter and stuff like that, where that's definitely one of the, things where, okay, if I do this work, if I do this planning, if I invest in order, then I can let a little bit of creative chaos have a day or two where where I'm able to flourish under those circumstances. But if it's all chaos all the time or all order all the time, neither of those work for me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you need to feel safe and secure in order to be able to really let your brain relax and then tap into that creative side
and take risks. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's correct. Yeah. So if your basic needs aren't being met or they're threatened in some way and you're feeling anxious about it, you're not going to be able to tap into that, the creative side of your brain or really even be able to relax and just enjoy, the time and space that you've got planned out. Right.
Yeah. I was listening to, I'm listening to Start With Why by Simon Sinek, and I'm really enjoying it. It's an amazing book. It's about a 7-hour listen on Audible. And he was talking about how trapeze artists, will only attempt a new trick with a net under them. And it's not just because of the safety thing. It's because of the psychological effect of feeling like they're safe to try something new, because their body is physically safe, therefore their mind feels safe, and they can get crazy with what they're willing to attempt that they would never be able to do if they didn't have that net under them. So that's what planning feels like to me when it comes to podcasting, as well as my day job. Same thing.
Now that hasn't always been the case. I know when we started podcasting, you were really reluctant to even take any kind of notes. You're just like, we'll just talk about it, And what do you think's changed for you to see the value in doing a little bit of prep?
Well, I mean, I don't know, prep,
or do you, or am I totally off base? Am I totally wrong here?
Well, no, that's worth thinking about.
Well, I don't really like it. Yeah.
The
value is a strong word.
I like today's episode. I'm working from a very rough outline with a set of words and very small notes for some of them, where I'm just relying on it to trigger my brain to go back to where I was when I was thinking about. So I like to do a lot of thinking about the things we're going to talk about. I just don't do a lot of formalizing it into written words, certainly no manuscripts or anything like that. But I like to feel like, okay, I've exposed my brain to the place it needs to be to talk about this topic, but that doesn't usually result in a lot of note taking or prep that way. But from the beginning, I would, you and I, we did books where we had already read the book. And then pretty much every day before we recorded, I would re-listen to the chapter or the section that we were about to talk about. And so while I didn't make a lot of notes, I did do a little bit of highlighting in the books, and I did a little, I circled a thought here or there. But for the most part, it's more just about having my mind in the headspace of, this is the topic you're responsible for talking about today. And just listening to that chapter right before we hit the record button was usually good enough to make me feel comfortable. But this way that we're going to have it laid out, where we know, we're spending a month on masculinity videos or vulnerability videos or how to make friends videos, stuff like that, I think will be helpful, because there will be a plan, but I'll still have the freedom to prep for every episode the way that I feel like I want to prep.
Yeah. And the other thing that I like about this is we can give people, people listening, a heads up in advance, kind of like you've been talking about homework, so they could actually watch that video or read that book well in advance, so that when they're listening to us, they can tell us how full of crap we are.
Yes, or they can,
or they can say, "Hey, no, you guys are spot on." I totally agree.
Exactly, and my queue of books that I want to talk about is just getting longer and longer and longer, which I love that we have a lot of things like that. And the same with the cool TED Talks and other videos that I've seen online that I think, man, if more people knew about this, they would really be able to get something out of it. So I'm feeling good about where we're going for the next. I think we got about 15 weeks left in 2022, so that'll be 15 episodes for the normals and 30 episodes for our patrons, and so it's going to be a lot of content that we're putting out there.
So speaking of our patrons, I do believe the membership, the intro patron membership, which we're calling what again?
Associate producers.
Associate producers is in celebration of this episode, right? This is number 50.
Correct. We are recording number 50 today. And so, as we've mentioned last time, as part of that, we're offering the first 50 people who become patrons a deal where they get it for $1 a month. And that will give them 2 episodes every week instead of just the normal 1 episode per week. And the second episode is going to be ad free, because we recently started running ads on Buzzsprout. We got to the point where we satisfied all their criteria for being able to run ads. And now we are doing that. So this episode included, you may hear an ad inserted that talks about another podcast that we have approved to advertise on our spot here. But if you're one of those first 50, as long as you keep your subscription active, you'll never have to pay more than $1 a month for 1 additional episode a week. So that seems like a pretty good deal. And as of right now, we've got 2 of our friends have signed up to be patrons. And we've got 48 spots left with other people we know who've said that they're going to sign up. So that those 50 spots aren't going to be open forever. I don't think we're recording this on a Friday and it's going to come out on Monday. I feel pretty confident that there'll still be some left on Monday, but don't dilly-dally or lollygag.
Great words. Are those some of the words we're going to cover today?
No, those
dilly-dally?
Are not.
Lollygag?
I've really been looking forward to this episode, because we're going to cover words that can make men nervous to scared to apprehensive. I think would be all words. I mean, these are words I freaked out a little bit about hearing them when people try to apply them to me, and I immediately want to push back and say, "Oh no, that's not me. That's not my problem. I'm not responsible for that." It makes guys and these words put guys on the defensive, and I think that's not being on the defensive is not a fun place to be. So if you can understand some of these words and some of these concepts and know where they're coming from and what they mean, and there's a way to take responsibility and accountability for yourself and not get to a place where you feel like you have to deny and defend. Because what that really speaks to is confidence, right? When you're confident, when you know who you are, what you've done, what you're about, then you don't feel a need to justify or defend your actions to people, right? But you also, when appropriate, you feel driven to apologize for things you have to apologize for, and not to apologize for things you don't have to apologize for. And having that realistic view of yourself and your place in the world, I think, can lead to increased confidence and increased effectiveness in the world, right? And in your relationships. So that's why I'm so excited to do woke words that scare men.
Yeah, my approach with this is I don't try to assume I know what they're trying to say. So I try to come from a place of curiosity and ask them because words have different meanings to different people. So when they're using those terms, well, give me a little bit more background, give me some context, give me some examples, and let me, based on what you're saying, let me try to understand it and see, does it apply to me? Does it not apply to me? Do I agree with it? Do I not agree with it? Rather than trying to hold on to my notions of it, because then I'm not really communicating at that point, right? I'm making assumptions.
Right. And if you can go into a conversation with anybody with an open mind and come from a place of curiosity and honestly a motivation where you say, okay, look, it's every person's responsibility to make the world a little bit better than it was when you came into it. And so, my one of the guiding principles for me is, what can I do on a daily basis to promote the well-being of other humans, and what's my responsibility to do that? And so if I can make the world a better place and make people feel like they have more potential, or they have more, what's the word I'm looking for? More of an opportunity to live up to their potential, where, their outcomes in life are based on the work and the ethical actions they're willing to take for themselves. I would like that I want people to have a good life when they're willing to work for a good life. And so if there are some ways where the deck is stacked against people, what can we do to make it more equality of opportunity for people so that they can live up to their potential and live the life they want to have? And so, when we starting from the very beginning with the word woke, which is that's a word that can be sort of weaponized in a couple of different ways, where I think the governor of Florida said something about Florida being the place where woke comes to die, and that's just basically him saying that he doesn't want to put up with wokeness or support wokeness. But what is it that woke means, and what is it that the people who use the word and coin the word mean when they say it? The definition that just comes up when you Google it is alert to injustice in society, especially racism. And so if you strip away the baggage and you just look at the definition and say a woke person is alert to injustice in society, especially to racism, then yeah, I want to be considered woke. I want somebody to say, okay, Charles gets it. When people are being treated unfairly, Charles sees it and understands it, and you want to label me as woke and try to use that as a demeaning term, by all means, have at it.
Yeah, so that goes, so can you give me some examples of where you feel like woke has been, taken and used in a way that means more or less than, injustice in terms of, racism?
Yeah, of course.
Or in society.
I mean, we're both in our mid-40s, so I'm sure you remember back in the 90s when politically correct became sort of the buzzword, where everybody was talking about, that's not a very politically correct thing to say. It's sort of, I feel like there's a lot of relationship between those two terms, politically correct and woke, where it's basically
very much so. I think
you're saying something that doesn't feel like it's okay in the terms of, what you're using language that has the potential to make people feel bad. Is that, would you say that's a way to say it?
Yeah. Yep.
With the exposure that I have to, I listen to a lot of comedy podcasts. I watch a lot of comedy specials, and I like comedy. I'm a comedy fan. And so sometimes the word woke or wokeness is referred to when comics make jokes about characteristics that people have that make them different from other people, whether that is their race, their gender, their sex, their orientation, whatever it is. When you make jokes about the differences between two people, sometimes that makes people uncomfortable, and sometimes they say that it's inappropriate for those kinds of jokes to be made, which, I mean, part of the goal of comedy is to be inappropriate. That's what we find funny. When people push up against what you're supposed to say, that's what a lot of us find funny. And are there comics that go over the line sometimes? Yeah, absolutely. There are people that, and I'm not saying they should be tossed in a cell because they said something they shouldn't say, but I hear comics say things sometimes that feel a little bit distasteful. And I'm like, oof, I don't know. I mean, you and I went to a local comedy show the other night, and I saw I heard one or two things, and I was like, ooh, that is sacrificing shock. It's trying to be shocking instead of trying to be funny, and it didn't make me laugh.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you on that in terms of also when I'm at a comedy show and they overuse swear words, and a lot of times they use it to try to make something funnier than it is, and at times it can be effective, but a lot of comics overuse it and almost sacrifice a good joke to be able to, use and swear in it and think that's going to carry the joke, and it doesn't. And to me, it kind of flops. But, I guess my question to you is, at what point is it our responsibility then to say, well, this isn't for me, I'm going to leave and I'm not going to listen and watch this comic anymore, or I'm not going to spend my money to buy his tickets anymore, or I'm not going to read these articles or watch this, TV program.
Yeah.
Because, right. And, it kind of plays into freedom of speech. And it'd be different if, I think we were held at gunpoint and said, look, you got to listen to this guy do his 40-minute routine. And you can't leave, that's a little different, but,
yeah, I would say
language
the part where it becomes a problem for me is when somebody through their comedy, or really through any kind of art, is basically communicating a message of, I have a problem with this group of people, and I'm going to use my skill at joke writing, or my skill at movie making, or my skill at writing a television show to go after this group that I have a problem with. That's when, I tend to throw up my hands and say, I didn't sign on for this. No, thank you. If you've got an issue with these people, then you can have an issue with whoever you want to, and you can sell tickets to other people that have the same problem as you. But I'm not interested in coming along for the ride. And so that's where I would say, if you're using a platform that you've earned for yourself through your talent to say, okay, now that I'm in this position, I'm going to go after these people because I don't really like them. And I'm going to do it in a funny way. I'm going to do it in an entertaining way, but I'm still going after these people. It's like, okay, that's not what I signed up for. Go have the career you want to have. By all means, it's all yours, but I'm not coming along for the trip.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I agree. And I mean, it's nice to be able to have the freedom.
It is. Yeah. I mean, people can find an audience, and it's not my job to, slap a microphone out of anybody's hand or slap a remote out of their hand if they're a viewer. And I don't have any interest in taking on that burden, but I do have an interest in saying, okay, this person's no longer for me. And I'm going to tell the people in my social circle that, hey, this person's no longer for me, and this is why. And then they can decide to either debate with me, they can agree with me, or they can just say, okay, well, if you're willing to write off somebody because you don't like their opinions, then I don't want to be your friend anymore. They're allowed to do that too. All right, let's talk about privilege, Dan.
Yeah, let's.
Do you feel like you're a privileged individual?
No, I don't.
No,
I don't.
No. Okay.
I don't. And because in my experience, I have not, and it's my limited world, my limited experience, I've not been in a situation where I feel like I've been given things or selected over other people, for whatever reason that might be, right? I feel like whatever I've been given, I have legitimately earned. I haven't cheated. I haven't deceived. I haven't stepped on other people in order to get it. So I know based on how I operate in my life and the experiences that I've had and the conversations that I've had, I've never been, led to believe that somebody chose me over somebody else for something that I didn't actually, legitimately put work into or earn, based on whether I'm a man or white or whatever. Now, I'm not saying that it didn't happen at some point, but based on my experience and the information that I've taken in, I don't feel like that has been the case. Now, I'm open to talking about it and being, and discussing it, but again, that's been my limited experience.
Okay, so I will share why I think I am profoundly privileged, and we can talk about it a little bit. So, first of all, what is privilege? Privilege is when you get a benefit that you didn't directly earn for yourself. You get that benefit because of something that happened that was outside of your control or your decision making. At least that's the way I'm defining it this way. And so here are some of the things that have affected my life that I didn't build for myself. Number one, I'm tremendously good looking, and I didn't.
Yes.
And I did.
Okay. I'm going to stop you right there. I'm going to stop you right there. I'm going to stop you right there. Hold on a second. Wait. Before I hate to interrupt, but no, I don't really. I want to point something out. Okay. Hold on a second. Do you feel like you are as good looking as you were, I don't know, 10 years ago, or are you better looking now? And, and is that as a result of something that you did, like maybe eat differently, exercise a little bit more, sleep a little bit? I mean, I feel like, as good looking as you are now, you did have something to do with that, right? There's a lot of people that are your age, right, that don't look as young and healthy as you do, right? And
thank you.
I mean, right now, I mean, obviously there's some things that are related to genes, but we know with epigenetics, we can turn things on and off and make things better or worse. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there and interrupt.
Fair enough.
Sorry.
Yes. But things like my, I mean, there are things about my appearance that, and I'm saying this mostly tongue in cheek because I would say, I consider myself to be slightly above average looks wise. Not I am not a matinee idol, but I do have certain facial characteristics that are indicative of a high amount of testosterone in utero, such as the way my hair grows, the way my voice is, my prominent brow. I mean, some of those things, whatever level of facial symmetry I have, I didn't do anything to earn those. Those are things that just happened to me. We would also say that now, yes, there are things, you and I have talked about when it comes to mate selection and dating and things like that. I'm of the opinion that if you look at all men across the board when it comes to dating and mating, there are about 10% of us that we just got a crappy deal when we were born genetically, and there's not a whole lot we can do to improve our appearance. There are 10% of guys that they don't need to do anything. They basically just came out looking really good, and they have a body, a physique, a face that is just really, really nice, and there's nothing they have to do or can do to make it any better or much worse. And then the other 80% of us are in the middle, where how attractive we are is going to be highly influenced by our behaviors and the choices that we make and health decisions and things like that. But there certainly is a component of the way I look is determined by the way my parents looked, and I have no impact whatsoever on their genetics or their choices or anything like that. It just is the way that it is. And intelligence greatly falls into that as well. And IQ is highly correlated to the success that you're going to have in life. And so I would say, being born with the way that I look and the intelligence that my brain is capable of, as well as the fact that, I was born a white man in 1970s America instead of a brown girl in 1400s Afghanistan. Those are two very different life experiences that I did nothing to influence whatsoever. I rolled the dice and they came up boxcars, as they say, which is, 2 6s if you're not a degenerate gambler. So I got lucky with when and where I was born, as well as, some of my demographics, and I didn't do anything to earn those. So I feel like that gave me a leg up on other people that I wasn't responsible for earning.
All right. So I'm going to read you something. I just Googled this because I didn't quite believe you about IQ and how it's not changeable. And both the University of Edinburgh, as well as the NIH, National Library of Medicine, has articles basically saying intelligence test scores and educational duration are positively correlated, meaning the more education you have, the more your IQ goes up. So The other thing too is there's a lot of different IQ out there, right? There's emotional, your emotional IQ, and emotional intelligence. And there's other factors I really believe that will lead to success that I think, I definitely think, we're definitely born with, a base level of intelligence. But I don't think it's just can be measured as easy as just saying, hey, IQ, and it doesn't change and it doesn't have anything to do with the way you live or the choices that you make. I come from the point of view where I think, there's some people that are definitely given a better break than others in terms of looks and health and genetics, because you can't choose your parents. A lot of disease and things are genetically related, but from the information that I've been studying, it seems like more and more we're realizing how much of an impact our environment, our upbringing, the choices that we make can actually affect a lot of things that are genes. You can make things a little bit. You're more likely to have cancer. You might have the genes, more likely to have cancer. And so then if you do things that tend to trigger, those genes to be turned on versus not doing it, then you're going to have more likely of one outcome versus the other. I think it's very difficult, to really get into. Just based on genes, you've got this, how much of an advantage you have. I think that's impossible to measure. I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
Agreed.
That's very difficult.
Yeah, you can't say you can't say how much of a factor just any one of these things are. Looks, intelligence, height. I mean, all those things are going to have some impact on the life you have. But we can certainly agree that being born a white man in 1970s America is a better deal than coming out of a woman who's on a slave ship on the way to America in the late 1600s. Sure.
But right. So where I have a problem, I guess, is where, I would agree with that. And then I guess where I have an issue is, and technically maybe that is, I am more privileged than that person. Yeah. I mean, I guess we can use it that way, but then where I feel there could be an issue is then if that is and somehow needed to be used against me in some way, or if, and somehow there needs to be some sort of evening of the playing field because of that. Right. And, I'm not saying not to help people, but not to bring down others.
Well, and I think that is a very common fear when we get into topics like this. And that's I think that's why a lot of men will push back on a term like privilege, because they feel like, okay, if I admit to this, if I admit that I've received some unearned favor or I got lucky in some way, so now does that mean you're going to take something away from me to give it to somebody else? Mm-hmm. And that's the part of this that does get a little scary and a little bit dicey. And, I'm not a fan of putting, somebody in charge at the government level whose job it is to balance all the scales and say, if we just all dump our money into one big pot and then we put somebody in charge of spreading things out equally for everybody, then we'll live in utopia. I don't believe that's the case either. But I do think there is a safer way to have these conversations and say, look, the people that did luck their way into some things that other people didn't have a moral responsibility that it is heroic for them to take on for themselves to say, okay, I got some breaks that other people didn't get. So what is it that I can do to make the world a better place for everybody?
Yeah. I mean, I think, humans, in order for us to be happy, we have to foster relationships. And that means, helping other people when they need it and contributing to society. And I think, a lot of our happiness is tied to having healthy, good, supportive relationships. So in that vein, I think it's you are helping yourself by helping others.
Yes, I would agree with that 100%. The more fair and equal your society is, the less chance that at some point a bunch of people are going to get together and flip over the game table and say, screw this. I don't want to play this game anymore. It feels like it's rigged. And then, then you have the French Revolution and things like that breaking out, where people feel like, this, no more monarchs, no more upper class, no more any of this. We're gonna wipe it all out and start from scratch. And that's when things like income inequality become an issue, where income, some people being way richer than other people isn't necessarily the nature of the problem, right? Because when you think about it, there's more disparity between Jeff Bezos and your average decamillionaire, somebody who has $10 million in the bank, than there is between the decamillionaire and a homeless guy living on the streets of LA. So we're not angry about income inequality when it's between a guy that has $10 million and a guy that has $200 billion.
Right.
That's not what bothers us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's, so what do you think it is that is bothering us?
What bothers us is the perception that somebody is rigging the game and they're getting benefits out of a system that other people aren't getting benefits out of. So it's unfairness that is what sets us off, not the mathematics behind inequality.
Right. Now, you're not denying that there's some unfairness, right?
No, there's certainly, look, there is definitely unfairness, and I think there's unfairness that tends to affect, people who are from certain ethnic minorities more than it does white people. And I think the root of that is basically, we've talked about this before. Capitalism is a very unequal system. I think it's the best of the unequal systems that we figured out so far, but poor people have a rougher time in capitalism. Well, poor people have a rougher time in every system than rich people do, right? But, and that's true for capitalism as well. And if because of historical factors and sociological factors, people that are members of minorities typically are poor more often than other groups, then they're going to be negatively affected by poverty at a higher level. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
So, I don't know exactly where I was going. This is tough stuff to talk about, man.
It sounds like you're trying to come up with a solution. No, I don't want you to keep going because we talked about, and Jordan Peterson had mentioned this as well in terms of he knows that there needs to be some sort of income redistribution, even with a capitalist system, but he doesn't know what's fair and doesn't even know where to begin with that. He just knows that it is so uneven, with some people like Bezos and stuff like that. And that something needs to be done, but he doesn't have a solution either. And he's been thinking about stuff like this for quite a while. So, we don't need to go and try to come up with a solution right now and get sidetracked or whatever. We can keep going with some of these other words that you came up with. But, it's, I definitely agree with what you said.
All right, let's, it's like each one of these on my list is tougher than the last one. Let's talk about white supremacy. So when I grew up hearing the term white supremacy, and even when I think about it now, the images that pop into my head are episodes of Geraldo and Phil Donahue and stuff like that, where, he's got a bunch of skinheads or KKK guys sitting on the stage talking about how, white people are the best and everybody who's not white is less than white people and blah, blah, blah. And then, then people in the audience stand up and yell at them and tell them how stupid and ignorant they are. And then occasionally a fight breaks out and somebody throws a chair and yada, yada, yada. Right. And
and then a half hour later, the show's over, right? It's
exactly.
You watched the whole thing before you knew it. I grew up in the same era, so that's exactly what I think of. Something that is so far removed from who I am and my beliefs. It's entertainment. It doesn't exist. It's a story, right? It's not that it doesn't exist, but it doesn't exist in my world. And it almost doesn't exist. It's almost fake to me because it seems because of that, right? I was on the TV show, like you said, it was so outrageous. You're like, oh, this is made up, right? People can't really believe this.
Right.
That's kind of what went through my mind is these are kind of like actors, or they are there because they're getting paid by Maury Povich.
Right. Right. Yes. And so here's the other side of that issue. Here's what some would say. Some would say, well, Dan, you have the freedom to think about it that way because you've never been negatively affected by it. So you get to think that it's basically cartoon characters saying crazy stuff on TV, where there actually are systems in place and there are people making hiring decisions and college admission decisions that deep down, even in places they won't talk about, believe some of these things, and that's affecting the society that we live in.
Right. And then I would ask them, I'm open to that being a possibility, but where's your proof? Where are you getting your information from to make these assumptions? Just like my assumptions aren't necessarily accurate, because from my experience, which is watching this as a TV show, where are you getting these ideas from that this is actually happening? And I'm open to considering them, but is it possible that, the information that you're getting is just as flawed as mine?
I think one of the pieces of evidence that would be offered would be to say, okay, well, if you look at positions of leadership in this country, whether that's, members of Congress, people who are in the Senate, CEOs of Fortune 500 corporations, the demographics of those positions where people are making big decisions for the kind of world that we live in, those demographics do not match up to the demographics of the country that we live in. So the number of, gay and lesbian people, the number of people of color, the number of men versus women, those in those high positions where people actually get to influence not only their own lives, but the lives of countless other people, those demographics do not match up to the demographics of our country. And so is that a reflection of a system that it has been in place and continues to be upheld that says, okay, we're all equal, but some people are a little bit more equal than others. Wink, wink.
Okay. So, I'm not sure. I think you can really associate the demographics of the country to the demographics of people in these positions, without being able to find out, was there a similar type of demographic that applied for these positions that are moving up in these companies? Does that demographic also represent our country, our country's demographics, right? The pool of people who are perhaps interested in these positions may not be reflective of the demographics, right? So
correct.
It's dangerous, I think, to assume that all the demographics that are represented in our country are also all going to be just as interested in those type of CEO positions, right? So for example, if we flip it on its head and say, all right, the demographics of this country don't reflect the number or the population of people the sanitation workers, right? People come pick up garbage, right? I'll be honest with you. I've never seen a woman, my entire life picking up garbage, right? And it's all men. So where are the women at? And it's because maybe a lot of women don't want to be sanitation workers. So, these like CEO and high level positions, there's a lot of other sacrifices these people need to make. Yes, they're paid very well and they're prestigious and stuff like that. And a lot of people might like that type of lifestyle. For me, I don't think I would. For me, that's because you then you lose your personal life, you lose your private life. You're responsible for so many people's jobs and lives. It's a lot of work too. So, it's really difficult to just say, all right, everybody's going to definitely want this. And it's white privilege or there's white supremacy in place that's preventing, all these people from being promoted and getting these jobs. I think it's real dangerous without having more information.
Okay. So let's ask the question about interest and let's say that for a moment, the reason that the CEO pools in Fortune 500 companies look the way that they do is because the people who are interested in being CEOs come from certain demographics. I think it's worth asking the follow-up question of why is it that those people are interested in those positions and other people may not be interested in it. So, for example, why is it that a little black girl growing up in this, in the city doesn't ever grow the interest of maybe someday I would like to be the head of Procter and Gamble or NBC Universal? And would you say that a factor in that would be when that little black girl's growing up, she doesn't see any other people that look like her doing that job, that kind of has an effect on her ability to see herself doing that? Just like astronauts, for example. If you've never seen an astronaut that looks like you, then how seriously are you going to entertain the possibility that you can grow up and be an astronaut?
Oh, absolutely. And, for me, it would be, like farming, right? I didn't really, grow up around farmers or like auto mechanics, whatever. And so I know for me personally, if somebody asks me to do stuff on a car, yeah, I can change a tire, but God forbid you ask me to like change the oil or do anything else. I didn't grow up in that environment, and I definitely don't see myself as thinking like I could be a successful, auto mechanic or astronaut even. You're right. Absolutely. I'm more likely to be involved in like mental health. My dad was a therapist, right? So, or is a therapist. So yeah, that absolutely, the environment that you grow up in and what you're exposed to absolutely influences, I think your self-esteem, what you feel like you can accomplish. And yeah, no question.
Yeah, but I would push back a little bit to say when it comes to farmer or auto mechanic, there's no job that you and I can fantasize about up to and including, NBA basketball player, CEO, president of the United States, movie star. There's no job that you and I can think of that somebody who looks somewhat like us hasn't already had, right? And I think that does affect our imagination and when we set goals for ourselves and what we think we can accomplish as a kid. I mean, yeah, there's never been a Victoria's Secret supermodel that looks like me. And the fact that I've never seen that probably has an effect on the idea that I never thought that was something that I would want to do or could do, because that's not what people who look like me do. But Victoria's Secret supermodels don't set government policy for 350 million people either. And they don't decide, what everybody's next car is going to look like or what everybody's food's going to taste like. I mean, where there are people in very high positions, the CEO, the president of the United States, and what they look like isn't quite the same as sanitation worker, farmer, and auto mechanic, right?
Correct. Yes.
So I guess the question is, are we in a system where people who look like me have had their take on the best jobs that we can come up with, and so therefore are people like me incentivized to keep the system going as it is because I'm doing pretty good? Me and the people that look like me are doing pretty good. So if I had my choice of keeping it going that way or changing it to something else, I could see that there may be some subtle ways that I'd be into keeping it just the way that it is. Thank you very much. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen,
and I think, I think the systems that are in existence for, I guess we're talking kind of like private businesses here and jobs and things like that. There are a lot of studies out that show the more diverse your workforce and the people in your company, typically, the more profitable and the better that the company actually does. And, and it makes sense to me just from the fact that when you get people from different backgrounds and different experiences, you're then pulling in more information and more experience and more ability to create new ideas and different ideas than if you are really, a homogenous group of people of one type of culture, right? You're going to be you're going to be limited, I feel, whereas you got people from all different parts of the world and different, different experiences. You're going to be able to take, hopefully, the best of all of those ideas, kind of like a purebred dog versus a mutt. You typically, right, mutts are typically a lot healthier because they've been, the genes have been, crossbred together, and they end up with a better product, a better,
right. The weaknesses
outcome,
are left behind,
a better outcome. Right. Yeah. And so, I think the tendency, the highly competitive nature of business these days, I think what's going to naturally happen is the businesses that promote, some sort of, diversity and are open to all walks of life, in any position, they're the ones that are going to really kind of survive. And the ones that are limiting the amount of information they're bringing in through their people, they're the ones I think they're not going to be able to survive, and they're not going to be able to compete eventually. And it might be a little bit of a little bit rough transition at this point for some people, but I feel like, logically speaking, it's beneficial, if not, for the fact that it's good to, for other people to help and support them as much as possible.
Yeah. And I think that in dealing with complex issues like this, sometimes as a society, we make the wrong call, and we try to fix these, historic injustices in the wrong way. We get a little clunky with our fixes. One of the things that comes to mind is when President Biden before he was president, when he was running for the 2020 election, he announced that his vice presidential pick, his running mate, would be a woman of color. And then he picked Kamala Harris, where it seems to me the better opportunity to make progress would have been President Biden, or then, nominee Biden, saying, I'm going to pick the best person for this job, and I'm going to look at people from every background. And when I make my selection, the selection is going to be the best person I thought would be able to pull the job off for this country. And then he picks a woman of color. That would have been so much stronger than saying, I'm going to pick from this specific pool first, and then say, because the implicit understanding is, and this is the way that I interpret it, and I think a lot of people interpret it, is he's saying, I just picked the best woman of color that I had available, instead of the best person available who happened to be a woman of color.
Right. I'm going to use you for the demographic that you are and that you're going to pull in, rather than for your skill set. And that's not what I'm talking about in terms of businesses that are, open to, a diverse background. It's you're not hiring someone based on that. That's not going to help you or the business or that other person, right? The idea is you're just open to, you're not closing yourself off to the best candidate based on skin color or gender or whatever, right? And that's my personal belief, is that those are the companies that are going to survive and do well, because, you hire people for that don't have the skill set. It doesn't matter what color they are, your company's going to flop at that point, right? Or the program in the government is going to be weaker for, because they don't have the skill set, you can't make up for, some basic skills. So,
right. And
dude, I 100% agree with that.
And the other problem is, even if you do pick the best person for the job, but you have framed it in a way where it feels like tokenism, even if it's not, but it feels that way, where you say, I'm going to pick from this demographic, and then the person that you get is the best person in that demographic, then that's tokenism is not the way to fix, a history of white supremacy. It just isn't.
Now that person has to swim upstream against that stereotype, right? Because, if somebody who hired you then throws that out there, now your job is twice as hard, because you have to then prove, you probably have to work twice as hard to show that you actually can do this job the best, more than anybody else, and have to, deal with that negative stereotype. Oh, great. Good luck. Yeah. No.
Right.
And it's not much different than hiring somebody in your family to work, in your company, right? That's a similar type of thing where you know, the successful companies that do that, you know, they frame it as, hey, I interviewed my daughter, you know, and she's going to be the best person for the job regardless, you know, and when she's at the office, she's my employee. She's not my daughter,
Right.
You know, and it's still, that makes it very difficult, but the whole nepotism thing speaks of that as well. Right.
Yeah. It's almost ironic and counterintuitive to think that, you know, love him or hate him, and there's plenty of reasons to do both. When George W. Bush made Colin Powell his Secretary of State and Condoleezza Rice his, I believe she was National Security Advisor, he didn't do it. He didn't say any of those things that Biden said before he picked Kamala Harris. He said he was out to find the best person for the job, and then the best person for the job in both of those positions happened to be a person of color. And again, I'm not endorsing any of their politics or anything like that. I'm just saying the messaging is better when you say, I'm going after the best people. And when the best people happen to be, you know, a man of color and a woman of color, that feels more like progress to me. And then, you know, and then you let them start a war in Iraq that didn't need to happen. But that's another story.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if that was their prompting or whose prompting, you know.
But there were definitely there were some missteps there, and it's a shame that it took away from you know what he was able to accomplish by putting some people in roles that historically they, you know, folks that look like them had never had before. Right. But we can move it all. It looks like we may get to make a part 2 of this topic, Dan, because I think we're going to run out of time. But I do want to try to squeeze in one more word, and let's see. I'll give you the choice. Do you want to talk about what it means to be triggered, or would you like to talk about toxic masculinity? Triggered's probably the shorter one.
Then let's go triggered.
Okay. So we hear the term triggered a lot, and usually, you know, it's funny. Most of these words that originated on the left of the political spectrum have been somewhat weaponized by the right, because basically whenever somebody on one side of the political spectrum decides to start using a new word that people aren't used to, then it seems like it's the job of your political enemies to take that word and straw man the heck out of it and then turn it into an insult, right? I mean, that definitely has happened in both directions in this country for a long time.
So let's if you don't mind backing up, can you define straw man?
Yes, a straw man is what happens. It's a logical fallacy where you take someone's argument for something and you change it. So you basically tell people that their argument isn't what it actually is. It's this other thing. And you change it into a very easy to attack version of it. Okay. The way it happens. Sorry, my cat is being especially charismatic today. So for example, if someone says after 9/11, radical jihadist Islam is a problem, and we need to deal with this. We need to figure out what it is where we can stop Islamic focused terrorists from committing acts of violence in the West. And then you respond to that by saying, oh, so you're saying that all Muslims just want to kill every American they can? That would be an example of straw manning, where you're saying, I have this one valid concern about this very small group of people that are doing very bad things. And then the other person takes that and says, okay, so what you're saying is blah, blah, blah. And that's not actually what I'm saying. That's not where it's in the ballpark of the subject that I'm talking about, but you've completely mischaracterized the thing that I said to make a really easy version to attack so you can feel like you've scored points in an argument.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of that. And I'll be honest with you, you know, when I was younger, before I was a little bit more aware of, you know, proper communication, using the superlatives, right? Always or never or everyone, you know, and making those generalizations. And, you know, you always, and I would say things like, you always do this, and without thinking about it. Right. And at that point, you're right. It's about winning the argument. It's about attacking the other person. It's not about resolving. You're not listening, and you're not working toward resolving the issue or trying to understand the issue at that point. And that's where I think we get into a lot of trouble, because, we may have been hurt in the past by that person. And then now we want to attack in any way we can. And that doesn't help. So the question is, do you want to win the argument, or do you want to resolve the problem at hand, identify and resolve the problem at hand?
Right. And certainly whenever you use always and never to mischaracterize either an experience or an argument, then all the other person has to do is come up with an example of when always or never doesn't realistically apply. And then then you're basically starting from scratch and having to run around the issue again. Right. So, here's what it means to be triggered. And this is very simple. And it essentially means that you've heard or experienced something that is causing you to relive trauma that happened in the past in the present moment. So you're experiencing something bad that you've lived through before, and it feels like you're going through it again because you've been reminded of that experience in a way that is reactivating the feelings that you experienced when that bad thing happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
let's say, for example, I'm driving in traffic, and at one point 10 years ago, I was in traffic and a blue car slammed on its brakes, and I rear-ended them, and I hurt them very badly, and I hurt myself very badly, and it was a miserable experience. And then I'm driving in traffic today, and a blue car slams the brakes in front of me, and I'm able to stop in time, so we don't make contact. There's no accident. There's no harm. There's none of that. But the feelings inside me take me back to what happened 10 years ago, and it feels like it just happened again, even though it didn't actually happen again. That, for me, that is a great example of what it means to be triggered. So knowing that is a thing that happens to people, I would encourage people to rethink it before they use it as an insult, or they use it as a way to demean what somebody's going through, or before you hear something that sounded slightly unkind or something that you didn't exactly understand. Don't be on either side of throwing around the word triggered in a way that trivializes the experience that some people really have. And the other thing is, when somebody tells you that they are triggered by something, it's your job to believe them. Don't call it into question. Don't tell them that they're being weak. Just say, okay, if you're feeling triggered by this, I believe you, and I give a damn about the fact that you feel triggered. So what can we do next?
Yeah, and that's, that being said, is triggered to me, the way you describe it is a really good way of describing it and thinking about it. And to me, it's subjective experience, right? And you have no idea, first of all, that person's background and history, right? And currently how much they felt, from whatever happened at that time, right? And how deeply they felt it. And for them, you might be able to feel that exact same level of emotion, when they're saying that they're triggered, and you might be like, it wouldn't have triggered me. Well, that's fine. That's your experience, and that's your state. That's your current state as well. Right.
Right.
So the amount of anxiety and anxiousness and emotion that we feel is really directly related to our current right then and there state. And so, did you just sit in traffic for a while, and are stressed out because you're running late, and now wherever you are having that conversation, you've built up that level of anxiety because, you've been stressed, or maybe had a long day or a bad day or whatever. Another person, just came back from vacation. And so there's going to be a lot less that, quote, triggers that other person than, you, or triggers the other person will be more than you. And so it's really important, I feel, and we both make an effort to find things to bring down our daily level of stress, because by doing that, I know when I spend time, spend time outside, spend time exercising, meditating, journaling, all of those things bring down my base level of anxiety. And I'm a lot less likely to feel that level of being triggered by things, in general. And so, that's a good tip though, that you said, Charles, try not to be triggered by the word triggered.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I would say, if there's one overarching theme that covers everything we've talked about today, I would say do what you can to, when somebody shares an experience or difficulty or the way they see, their society, their country, whatever, and it's different from yours, just believe that they're telling you the truth. I mean, you can constantly have your antenna up, and this is something that I think, at least in the last couple of years, Jordan Peterson has not done a great job at, where whenever somebody is trying to explain to him what their personal experience has been and the way that they see the world, if you're always on the lookout for, I think this person's trying to pull one over on me, I think they're trying to con me, I think they're trying to trick me so that they feel, so that I'll be guilted into giving up something of mine, or I'll be able, I'll be willing to even the score, and I'll give up, what I've earned in my life to give them something. And if you're always on the lookout and paranoid that somebody's out to get you by telling you a story that doesn't make sense to you because it doesn't match up to your own experience, you're going to find yourself pretty lonely. And yeah, maybe no one will ever pull a con job on you, but you're also never going to open yourself up to the new experience of understanding somebody who's different from you. And so I would say, open yourself up to when somebody tells you that they are having an experience that's different from you because, they're a different gender, they're a different race, they're different sexual orientation than you. Just believe the story that they're telling you, that it's probably true, that they're probably not out to get you by tricking you into believing something that's not true. And just be open to the fact that they've got something to teach you because they've got a completely different experience in their life than you've had.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're not going to know whether they have something of value to teach you or not if you are closed off immediately. Right.
Right.
And so that goes to, it's being a good person. And I think being a good person and being a good member of society and being able to connect with other people means you need to take care of yourself first. Right. So if you are coming from a place where you are stressed out and you're anxious, you're not going to be open to new ideas because those things take energy and time to really be able to understand and be willing to hear things that sometimes you might not agree with, or might be strange, it might be uncomfortable. So do that self-care, and spend that time, taking care of yourself so that you can connect and be a better person for other people.
Yeah. And we're not suggesting that you have to be in a position where you just jump from idea to idea to idea and you don't have any core values, you don't have any core beliefs that you are able to hold close. It's just, look, I mean, guys, the more threatened and uncertain you feel about your life and your position in life and your relationships, the less open-minded you're going to be to new experience and new kinds of people. And so ultimately, the greatest gift you can give the world is your confidence and realizing that, no matter what kind of new thinking I'm exposed to, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to survive. I'm still going to be able to go out and get the resources I need to keep myself alive and with a roof over my head and food in my belly. And the more confident you are that you can pull all that off and you're going to be okay, the more open-minded you can be to people and experiences that are different from anything you've encountered before. And that's where I think, a rich life comes from.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And know that, as you practice being open and receptive, you're then showing the other person who may not be as open or receptive as you, but, you can lead by example and you can show them how to do it. You can give them examples in terms of, you actually listening to them, asking questions, and it may not seem like it at the time, but, you are then influencing that person and you've put your message out there. And I feel that's a good thing to do.
Yeah. And again, the hallmark of these conversations, when you get into trying to understand somebody else's experience, their way of life, whatever, is just be curious, not judgmental, as the great Ted Lasso says. Curiosity, not judgment. And okay, so Dan, you know what I think we should do? I think we should finish this conversation in a Patreon exclusive episode where we finish going over some words like intersectionality, gender, cultural appropriation, what it means to mansplain. We can take some of these and we will put them in in one of our Patreon exclusive episodes, and we'll finish this conversation.
I love the spur of the moment idea, Charles. Let's do it.
All right. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Dan. I appreciate you being willing to touch on these, I mean, touchy at the least, dangerous at the most topics. And, look, guys, we both acknowledge we have new things to learn. We don't have the market on good ideas cornered. And the things that, and sometimes I don't know what I don't know. And so this is where I would love to get some feedback on issues like this. And that can be anything from Charles, you're being too soft to Charles, you're being too hard. I mean, whatever you think that I've got something to learn here, reach out and let's have some conversations about it, because I think that's how we all get better.
Absolutely. I love that idea.
All right, cool. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate you doing this with me. And I will see you later today when we plan out our podcast.
Sounds great, man. Thanks. Have a good one.
Bye. You too. Bye. Thanks for spending time with us on the Mindfully Masculine podcast. If you like this episode or think that it would be useful for someone else, please leave us a review and follow Mindfully Masculine on Instagram.